sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. And even if we hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have known what to do anyway. We can understand someone dying for a person worth dying for, and we can understand how someone good and noble could inspire us to selfless sacrifice. But God put his love on the line for us by offering his Son in sacrificial death while we were of no use whatever to him.
Thank you, Thea, for bringing this word of Scripture to us today. In light of all the many pieces that I have in front of me on pages of paper, the question is, do I move on to Thanksgiving and intercession, or do I do the sermon? I'll do the sermon. I just thought that it would be mindful of us as we hear this word today and are aware of the many different things that are unfolding, that it brings us back to the foundations. Why are we here today? Why are we here at all? What brings us together as God's people? And so in these thoughts from Scripture today, it's a reminder. Paul, writing to the early church in Rome, encouraging them, continually reminding them, bringing up again the things of first importance. And on a day when we have many things of importance that we've named already, this is of first importance for us. Access has become a key phrase in our technological age. Access. At any door, we may try to remember the access code, many times forgetting it and needing somebody to help us just to get in. At the computer, we turn the noun into a verb, and I need access to that file. When I'm at home trying to retrieve messages from my workplace email account and my finger or my memory slips as I try to type my password, the screen goes blank except for the sad judgment, access denied. Have you ever had that message come to you? Many of us have different passwords for our email accounts, our banking, our travel service, our online vendors from whom we order books or any kinds of things, CDs, fresh fruit. Some of us write a carefully coded list in the back of our calendar book or phone of all the passwords that we are apt to need, and only hope that we do not lose them, because we'd be locked out of everything. Paul wrote for a world in which people were desperately trying to find the password that would give them access to God. Some thought that careful obedience to the law of Moses was the access code. Others thought that civic virtue was the key. Still others tried to placate God by the breadth of their philosophical knowledge. That's got to be the key, the access code. Opening up the knowledge of God. Even today, we've named many key phrases, possible access codes to being recognized by those around us. Father's Day, World Refugee Day, graduates, all of them, each and every one holding a significance in our worldview, and for us to pause and recognize. But even as amazing as they are not the ultimate access code. Paul's astonishing claim is that there is only one password that we need to remember. Oh, wouldn't that be so good? Only one word for everything to open up all of those things that we struggle with on a daily basis in our life. What's the one word? Come on, it's the same question we ask children when we're asking them, and we know the answer. What's the one word? Jesus. Jesus Christ. And that in Jesus Christ, everyone has access to grace. And suddenly the entire picture is reversed. It's sort of like as soon as you get the access code, it opens up and something opens up, but they've changed the picture that you had before. And said, whoa, what happened there? As soon as we have the access code and we open it up, something shifts. And it's the shift that we have in Jesus is not that we are striving to reach God. It is that God is striving to reach us through grace. It is not that we use Jesus to attain our striving to God's mercy. It is that God sends Jesus to enact the mercy that God has intended from the beginning of time right into our lives. In a world so divided and twisted in the claims of how we fight for the right way to understand and enact God's mandate, I am going to fight all that I can, and I'm going to take down everyone that isn't in agreement with me. Boy, what a world we live in. It's not a new world. It's been throughout the generations. The same fight, repeated over and over again, with the same result. That's not what God has called us to. Never has, and never will. Scripture is clear, over and over and over again. It is grace that wins the day. Grace is not only the activity of God in Jesus Christ that reaches out to include everyone. In Paul's case, especially both the Jews and the Gentiles. Those were the fighting factions, philosophically, but often physically as well. Grace is also our dwelling place. This grace in which we stand, the Scripture says. God's goodness to us surrounds us, upholds us, and defines who we are. Our lives are shaped by the gift we can never achieve by our striving. But we can only receive in full measure by God's grace. And Paul tells us that what the life looks like that is grounded in grace, it is not usually marked by earthly success. And most certainly not blessed by earthly prosperity. Oh, if only I can have enough money to do anything I want to, and then I can do all this good in the world. But we get there and we say, oh, I haven't got enough. I got to go harder and farther and deeper and stronger. Forget the people until I get what I need. Boy, things get so twisted so easily, don't they? Far more often, this life is marked by suffering. It is, after all, a Christ-shaped life that lives in grace. but the suffering bears its own fruit. Or better, grace bears fruit through our suffering. The litany of the gifts of grace is a kind of sketch of moral and spiritual development for the person grounded in the grace of God. Start with suffering, which moves us to endurance. From endurance comes character, and from character produces hope. Ethicists are much committed to helping us think about character ethics these days. Paul would say that we can be pretty sure someone has character, the character right, if they live in hope. Because hope is from God. And then note that the source of the instrument of this hope is love produces hope. We all know that that is true existentially. A child who lives in hope is a child who has been surrounded by love. A writer said he heard William Sloane Coffin Jr. say that the opposite of love is not hate, it is fear. The consequence of that is clear. The product of love is hope. Paul will say in Corinthians 13 that there are three gifts of God's Spirit. They are faith, hope, and love. In Romans 4 and 5, part of what we've just read today, the gifts are inseparable from one another and from God's Spirit. The love to which Paul points, as he has already made clear, is not simply human love. That's always conditional on someone. It is God's love, shown in Jesus Christ, into us and through us. The verse about the distinction between dying for a righteous person and dying for a good person in the verse 7 of what was read today has puzzled many scholars with good reason. But all of that is the preface to the main point, that Christ has died not for the righteous and not even for the good, but for the ungodly. When we stop and think of things in those terms, we have to shake our head a little bit, because in our human understanding, those things make no sense. Why wouldn't God come for the righteous and the good? But right here in Scripture and throughout Scripture, God came for those that are lost. God gave his life in Jesus Christ for those who are lost. That is the good news, because most of us know perfectly well, if we're honest, that the category of the ungodly includes us. Now, it's even clearer than when we began. What counts is not so much our access to God as God's access to us. It is not that we reach longingly toward heaven, but that heaven reaches out longingly to us. It is not that we are good enough or wise enough or obedient enough to gain God. That's human effort. It is that God has gained us for himself. John Buchanan, a former congressman in Alabama, told of how he first began to understand the Christian story. He was serving in the front in the Second World War. He and a group of his fellow soldiers were advancing when the enemy lobbed a grenade into their midst. Instantly, one of Buchanan's fellow soldiers fell on the grenade, absorbed the explosion, and gave his life for his friends. In our human concepts, we can't get our head around that. We don't know what that's all about. Why do people do that? Why would God do that for us? And it only shows our lack of a clarity of God's grace and love for us. The claim outreaches all of our metaphors. All of the ways that we could describe it like this. It happens in this manner. You've experienced this. Well, that's like what? No, none of our metaphors work. They're not big enough. They're not expansive enough for us to grasp the fullness of what God has offered to us. The name Jesus, that access code, the name Jesus called out from the depths of our heart because of the commitment that we have made to be followers of Jesus Christ. That name embraces all of our weaknesses. Jesus Christ, the access code. No, not only the access code, the absolute reality of God's grace. Right here where we stand.